Okay, folks. Hey, welcome. It is another episode of a Technical Tuesday, part 2 of the Cassowary mug making adventure. There's lots to do. We've got the plaster mold, which we made in the last episode. What are we doing today? Well, not today. We're going to do a lot of it today. We're going to open this up. We're going to make a silicone mold of it, and then we're going to cast plaster production molds. And then hopefully by the end of this episode, we will actually get a cassowary mug casting. But first, I'm a little out of breath. This is heavy. We have to open this up, and this is a little stressful, to be honest. I wasn't even going to film this because I never know how it's going to go, but you deserve to see the whole adventure unfold. So let's crack this open, shall we? Why am I stressed? Well, I don't want to break the mold. This is the only chance I'm going to get, and if I break it, I'm probably going to destroy the sculpture too, which will leave us with a broken mold and a ruined sculpture. Not a good place to be. All right, promising start, promising start. If you are wondering what those little red-handled tools I am using to pry open the mold are, they are some sort of automotive tool. I think it's like a spring release plier, a snap ring plier. I don't know. I'm going to put a link to them in the description of this video so that you can get your own. They are extremely wonderful for opening molds. I first learned about these when I was a special effects artist many, many, many moons ago. It's opening. Oh, it popped right off. Oh, yes! Oh, that's fabulous. That is fabulous. Oh, that does not always happen. Oh, look at how good that surface is on the bird. Woo! All right. Home stretch. This is the moment where I regret not putting a pry point in. So these little pry points are really handy, and I should have put one in here. Thought about it as I was going to bed last night. I'm like, I don't think I put a pry point in for the little back nubbin piece. Sure enough, that's the one that doesn't come out. Oh, I see some movement. Yep, it's loose. It's loose. It's loose, everybody. So what I want to do is I actually want to take, this can't slide out that way because of the way the keys work. It has to come up with the sculpture. So I'm going to put a screw in here and try to lift out the whole sculpture. Got that plywood armature in there. Gives me some purchase for the screw. Can we lift this out? That does not want to come out. All right, we're going to put in another screw. I do not want to put this screw so deep that it comes through and hits the plaster. That would be terrible. Going to move to the edge here because I don't want it to pop out and fall and then I'd lose this piece. Oh, yes! Yeah! Oh, God. So glad this didn't fall. All right, there we go. We got that out. Let me just quickly remove these. This is going pretty well. Did I worry about this all night? You bet I did. Well, not all night, but it definitely was on my mind. I had the kiln program to start at about midnight last night to do a bisque firing, and I put this right next to the kiln, hopefully to soften up this monster clay inside. And you know what? It didn't really do much. The temperature, especially on a bisque firing, didn't reach it. But here we go. We can see inside, and we have got that little void that we had made, which is going to be interesting to see how this works out. There it is. Woo! All right, we're gonna clean all these up and we are going to make a silicone mold of these plaster molds. Before we make the silicone molds, I go back and clean up all the rough spots on the plaster molds. This is our last chance to address any flaws or dings or whatever, things we don't like. So I'm gonna round all my corners. I'm gonna put a bevel on all the edges to prevent them from chipping and to make them look extra pretty. And then we are ready for silicone. Why are we doing silicone? I am so glad you asked. It involves a little bit of mold math. Now, we could go right ahead and start slip casting with this mold that we just made, but what if I drop that mold and it breaks? That means we are out of luck. We have no way of repairing the mold, and we would just lose this entire edition. On top of that, molds have a lifespan. This one master mold that we have is probably only good for about 20 castings before it begins to degrade, and it won't produce good castings anymore. Sure, it would produce a casting, but it would require a lot more cleanup, and the detail would get softer and softer as we progress further along in the casting cycles. And the last thing to consider with a single mold is time. You can do about one casting a day. So that means for doing one casting a day in a standard 5-day work week, we're going to end up with 5 castings. That means to get through the entire edition of 200 mugs, it's going to take us, it's going to take us 40 weeks. And that is why we make a silicone mold of the plaster mold, so I can cast, say, 10 molds, and that means every day we can do 10 castings. And that means in a week we can do 50 castings, which means it'll take us only 4 weeks to get through the edition of 200 mugs, if we cast that many mugs in a week, which we won't, because that's a lot of mugs for the two of us to handle. All right, folks, it's time to assess where we are. And this is the moment where I really kind of lament that I no longer work at K&B Effects Group, and that special effects company, which I was part of decades ago, because there was a team of brilliant mold makers that I could always ask questions of. Here in the studio, I'm a mold making department of 1, so I've got to make all these decisions myself and hope that I'm making the right decisions. The thing I'm wrestling with right now is this massive volume on the side of the mold. These molds are big, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm debating, do I wanna just cut this whole corner off? Do I really need this corner? The answer is not really, but I am concerned. I have my whole kind of setup to make square mold boxes. That's just the process that I use in the studio, and I know it works really well. And I also wanna maintain a good volume up here to act as the well when we're gonna drill that channel. And I don't want this mold to be tippy when I'm casting with it. So I think I'm just gonna leave them as is, but it's tricky to make these decisions. I guess this is all part of being a grown-up. It's like you have these little tests, and instead of getting a report card, you just have to deal with the repercussions of your choices. Anyway, speaking of report cards, if you were studiously watching the last episode, you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute, this isn't all the molds, you still have one more mold. You are right. We do have one more mold. Where is it? We've still got to open up this mold. It's the eye bone mold. I don't know what it's technically called. I'm not a bird doctor, but we got to pop this one open as well and clean it up so that we can start figuring out how big our mold boxes have to be. So it's funny, rambling away there, I had a bit of a revelation. Just the other day, I was talking to Denise about the anxiety I have when it comes to making molds here in the studio, and how I don't remember ever having that degree of anxiety when I was making molds for the special effects industry. And I was puzzling over why. Why do I feel so much more stressed now than I did then? And I'm thinking, is it because this is my work and not work for a studio? And I'm like, that doesn't make sense, because it was just as important to me back then what I was molding, even though I wasn't necessarily putting my name on it, or it wasn't exactly something that I sculpted. It was still very important. And I just realized right now the difference is the team. I had a team of fellow mold makers in the studio that I could look to for support and get answers to my questions. And it was great. Now, that's not to say I don't have people today that I can ask questions of. Denise gives me a great amount of help and support and encouragement. And there are lots of artists online that I look to for help. But those online artists, they're not on my payroll or the company payroll, and they're not fully invested in the project that I am currently working on. I can't expect them to really understand the ins and outs of what I'm doing. So in a nutshell, I miss that team greatly, and I just realized now that not having that team definitely ups the level of concern and stress that I have when molding things in the studio. Oh, ha-ha! That's nice. All right, it's time to do a bunch of careful measuring and build mold boxes and pour some silicone. Now, I'm not going to dive too deeply into this because I've covered it in past Tiki Technical Tuesday videos, which I will put links to and I will in the description. I will say that this mold was gigantic, so I did recycle a bunch of old silicone because I was worried that I did not have enough in the studio. How do I do that? Well, I take old silicone molds of mugs that the edition is closed and I cube them very carefully. Please note I am using a cut-proof glove on my hand to avoid cutting my fingertips off because silicone is very difficult to cut. I then can take all those little bits of silicone and throw them into the liquid silicone when I pour these molds, kind of like making a beef stew. Once the silicone is set, it's time to start pouring our production plaster molds. These are the plaster molds that we are going to actually use for slip casting. And once I figure out how much plaster is necessary for each one of these little silicone molds, I write down on the sides of the mold itself so I can remember in future editions how much plaster I needed to fill the mold. And once that plaster is set, we pop it open and we are ready for the next step. Okay, I just pulled the very first casting out of the production or the silicone mold. So this is the first production casting and it's going to have to sit for at least a week. I'm going to put it in the glaze room under a fan and I'm going to try to at least do one bisque firing or one glaze firing to help drive all the moisture out of here. At this point, we're just going to use the magic of editing and jump forward in time. Hopefully this mold will be dry and we will be working on putting a hole in here so we can take the very first casting out of this mold. Can't wait. Okay, hopefully you can hear me. So today was a glazing day, glazed starfish today. And as I left the studio, I noticed that the first cassowary mug, out of breath. The first cassowary mold that we cast last week is dry. It's dry enough to cast. So what I'm gonna do is head back to the studio and drill a pour hole so that we can try to pull the first cassowary mug casting tomorrow. Oh, this is a big hill. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm really excited about it. Oh, I hope it works. Okay, I'm back from the run. I'm a sweaty mess, but I'm dying to see how this will cast, so let's get into it. First of all, how do I know this mold is dry? Great question. It's no longer cold to the touch. I can put it next to my cheek and it doesn't feel cool. It feels neutral in temperature. When a mold still has too much water in the plaster, it will always feel cold because that water is evaporating away, which cools off the surface of the plaster. So if you put it on your cheek and it doesn't feel cold, you know it's ready to cast. This is going to be a bit of a guessing game. All right, I have marked what I think is the spot for the hole. I just kind of, as you could see, had my fingers on the inside of the mold, and I think that this is a good spot to start with the hole. I might make it larger than this, but I'm definitely not going to want it any smaller than this. Let's do it. I used a variety of tools to open up this opening. I used like some big rough files. I used some sharp loop tools, and I still haven't figured out what tool works best. Once I got the mold though ready to go, it was time to go to bed and get up early and make a casting. Remember my big mold math talk? Well, here it is in action. I am cycling through 10 starfish mug castings. And so I have 10 starfish mug molds, which I've got to kind of juggle around like playing a big game of plaster Tetris. And then I'm going to add to this the new cassowary mug. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is it. So far, so good. I think I'm gonna have to go back in and just check this level. Oop, let me start my timer. All right, so I let the starfish dwell for 1 hour and 20 minutes, quite a long dwell. So I'm gonna keep checking this back, and I might have to refill this as the slip level drops, as the moisture gets wicked out of the slip. Oh, so excited about this. Now I'm waking up. I'm waking up! If you're curious as to why I am constantly refilling this, and if you're wondering where is the slip going, be sure to check out my How Slipcasting Works video. I will put a link to that also in the description, and it explains the science and just amazing process that is slipcasting. Of course, we cannot forget the eye bone mold. Here it is. I decided to fill this with this little like condiment restaurant supply thing. It makes it a lot easier than trying to use the giant slip pump to fill such a tiny mold. I don't think the slip made it all the way in there. I don't know. It just didn't seem like it. I know it's a really small volume, but I may have to rethink this mold design. I don't know. We'll find out soon. All right, I have flipped and drained all of the starfish mugs. It's time to flip and drain the cassowary. I kind of have a guess on how I want to angle the mold to drain it, but I don't really know. This is the first casting. It's a test. We don't really know how it's gonna go. So let's just find out what happens. That didn't seem like a lot of slip. So right now I know that the cassowary is in there like that, and I want to try to get the slip out of this. So I think that, let me see. This is what it looks like right now. Oh, so I actually want to tip it this way. All right, so I'm gonna just tip it a little bit just to help slip get out of here. Like I said, this is all experimentation. That doesn't look precarious at all. All right, I'm gonna let this sit here for 15 minutes, and then I will come back and flip all the starfish mugs over, flip this over. I'm gonna try to trim out the inside kind of well to make it easier to demold. And then we will come back, let's see, it's currently, I don't know, like, what time is it? It's 7:30, we'll come back at 9:30 after breakfast. It's waffles today, and we'll open these things up and see how they turned out. Okay, it's time for the moment of truth. Now, I should say that as a rule, first castings out of a mold rarely work for me. I would say I have almost like a 50-50 success rate in a very first casting. Several things can go wrong. Maybe I didn't let it dwell long enough, so the slip is not thick enough on the inside of the mold. Maybe the slip didn't drain properly, or just maybe I don't really know how to open the mold or pull the mug out of the mold safely without tearing it or damaging it. I'm saying all this because I don't want you to get too excited and hopeful like I am in this video, because it can kind of be a letdown if that first casting, spoiler, doesn't come out like you hoped.
No? Oh, it's like really weird on the back. It's just all really chunky in the bottom.
Yeah, it's tearing. To add to my disappointment, I went ahead and tried to open the eye bone mold as well, and I opened it a little early and kind of forced them on the way out. Well, I couldn't resist trying to pop this open, and as you can see, it just did not work out. I don't know. I'm worried about this round shape just locking up in here before I can demold it. I'm gonna have to experiment some more with this to see if I can pull this off. It's like I said, it's not required for this mug, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of just frustration. So I'm gonna work on this just a little bit more to see if we can get some good castings out of this. But I don't want to fixate on this, if you know what I mean. Okay, I just finished seaming today's starfish mugs along with Denise, and I've had time to kind of process the challenges I had with casting the first cassowary. I do think I was kind of rushing it. I really just wanted to try to get one out this morning, and I think that trying to cast that first casting along with the 10 starfish of the day, it was asking a lot of myself. So I'm just backing up. I'm taking a step back. I think I'm going to modify the molds this afternoon, but I'm not going to try casting it tomorrow with the starfish on Friday. I might just sneak in on Saturday and try to do one casting, or maybe I'll try casting the cassowary by itself Friday afternoon. Basically, I'm trying to not jumble it together with this mug. I want to give it all of my intention so that I don't mess up another casting. Okay, it is Friday afternoon. We're going to be doing Pauhana Gotcha Gotcha in it's a little less than an hour and a half. So it's been a casting day. We've been working on the starfish. Today was the very last casting day for starfish. Well, we finished out the edition of 150. I still have to cast 3 more for the 10 super limiteds that we're doing, but it's super exciting to finish that edition. All that being said, I don't have a lot of time today to work on this. So what I'm going to do for the remaining hours of this Friday is kind of refine this opening shape. I think that I can improve it a little bit. I'm going to use some different tools and just open this shape up a little bit more so that it will hopefully release easier, and it will let me get inside of the opening here and clean out the slip once it's set, so that there'll just be less stuff grabbing, hopefully, when we do the casting. That's the plan, and we'll be back on Saturday to try to cast one. All right, it's Saturday. It is a very cold yet sunny Saturday, and I'm going to be in the studio working. Now, I'm not excited about this. In fact, I'm a little bummed about having to work on a weekend, but that's what you do when you are self-employed sometimes as an artist. So what are we doing? We're going to attempt to cast that cassowary again, and hopefully it comes out this time. I'm not going to do one. I'm going to try 2 different cassowaries. The first one, I think I may have opened up the mold in a way that won't work too well. So hopefully this second mold, I cut a better opening in it. We'll see. We're going to try it out. Anyway, we're going to pour it. We're going to let it dwell for an hour and 20 minutes. During that time, the solaces, I will be able to tinker on my remote control car. This morning I went to my favorite place, Eugene Toy and Hobby, and I bought some little lights for my RC car. Yes, I'm going to nerd out to try to soothe my soul over the fact that I'm working on a Saturday. Before we pour, I got to clean all this stuff up. The starfish are done. We only have to cast 3 more for the super limited edition. So I'm going to put 7 of these molds away, just keeping 3 out for casting next week. It'll give me a lot more room on the table. And then we will pour some cassowary mugs. It's funny, every mold has like a different shape and a different balance. And whenever I switch from like a different edition, like the starfish, for example, to a new mug shape and weight and balance, it takes a little getting used to. It's like riding a different bicycle. Like, I know how to ride a bicycle, but this bicycle is just a little different. I spent a lot of time agonizing over getting a good draining angle for these molds. And in the end, I found out just letting them sit flat works best. But you know, you got to experiment. Alrighty, the molds have sat for around 2 hours. I guess we're at like an hour and 45 minutes, and I'm just going to take a look and see what we have got going on in here. If you remember, I changed the draft angle on these. I made it a little less aggressive, the angle of the eyes. Will it work? Let's find out. All right, that is a fantastic start. Okay, wow, they actually came. Look at that. Ah, excellent. Okay, so these worked great. Now the catch is though, I don't want these to dry out, so I'm gonna put them under some plastic. See that? Like it just takes a little bit of changing of the mold and everything's okay. All right, but we gotta set these aside so that they don't dry out. Don't panic, don't panic, don't panic. Really wasn't thinking ahead because I didn't think they would work. What I need is a small Tupperware for these, which I don't have at the moment. So I'm just going to put them in a damp bag. Yeah, they should. They'll be okay in there. All right, let's move on to the mugs. Continuing that bicycle analogy, every mold in casting has its own timing too, and it changes with every mug. So I've also got to kind of learn the timing for this mug. So what's the best amount of time to let it set before I try to pull out this extra sprue material? I really don't know, but I'll find out eventually. First castings are usually very sticky too. You kind of almost have to break in the mold. Nice, nice. Oof, it's just not working. Not happy. Oh, why? Just doesn't want to come out. This section just doesn't want to lift out. It's really binding in here. Well, I'm not going to lie. I'm feeling like I should have made this mold with another piece and just with the additional seaming and challenge of that additional piece. Because this is rough. This is a rough moment. This is a rough moment for me. Oh, it's really rough. Okay, we're gonna try the other one. And of course my mind is racing. What can I do differently? I'm gonna try to pull the slip out of the pour spout differently on this one. And I'm thinking, I have heard tell of some people coating the pour spout of their plaster molds with Vaseline, like a petroleum jelly. And that prevents the slip from wicking into the plaster around that area, and it washes out right away. Nothing really stays there. It never sets against the plaster, and that might help. That will be my emergency test that I will go to if this next one fails, which I suspect it will. Well, that was telling. The backside actually lifted on that one, that's a positive sign. Stay positive. Now this is a little soft. Do I just let it sit for a little longer? We got it out! Oh, Oh, such relief. Such incredible relief. Okay. Holy moly, we got one. We got one. It's a little distorted. Let's fix that form a bit. Ooh. We got it. We got it out. We got it out. Holy moly. All right, let's get this mold together and then we'll seam this thing. Okay, I'm really happy with it. This was definitely a hard-won casting. It was tough to get to this point, and I'm really pleased. Every time, I'm going back to the bicycle analogy, I can cast and seam those starfish now in my sleep with my eyes closed. I don't even think about it. I have cast 150 of them. I know the shape. I know all the little turns and nuances of the molds. So I'm very quick with it. So it's weird to come to a new shape, a new mug, a new form, and have to figure out all of these shapes and angles and what works best and what should I tackle first. It can be really tricky. So I have to remind myself that and, give myself grace, as they say, because it takes time to learn a new skill, and every mug is a new skill. That being said, let's add to the challenge and see if we can get those eyeball bones to work. I don't know. They're not required. I suspect the ocular bones will only be on the super limiteds, but who knows? Maybe we'll put them on the full edition. I don't know. Just all those questions. It comes time, money, expense, cost, what people would pay. All those questions come into bear, but let's just see if we can even get them to work first. Probably should have sponged it before I cut it. That does look neat. Okay, that looks super rad. Will that survive the firing and drying process? Who can say? But we'll find out. Oh man, that was a stressful afternoon of casting. All right, we got one. We got one done. I'm gonna let this dry for several days, and then we will bisque it. Oop. And yeah, I don't know where to end this episode. You know what, maybe we'll just do one more quick breakdown on what the mold is looking like. I'm gonna reach out, like I said, to some artist friends and see what they say as far as other things I can try. Maybe I'll put, as I was doing this, I'm thinking maybe I can just seal it with like a lacquer or something else to just stop the action of the plaster wicking away. And I don't know. We've got some experimenting to do, but this is a very promising looking casting. I really can't wait to get glaze on it. All right. Not the end, but I'll be back when it's actually a work day, not a weekend. Clearly I need some sleep. Social media is a wonderful thing, and after reaching out to several artists who know far more about slipcasting and ceramics than I do, a special shout out and thank you to Mitchell Spain Ceramics, Brett Kern, Tim, and the mysterious Recollection Toys, I decided to try doing an experiment coating the inside of one of the molds with mold soap. I carefully marked off that mold so I would know that that one is the mold soap one, and I wouldn't try to use it for other castings, and we set to work. Okay, so the slip was noticeably softer in the pour spout area than it was on the non-mold soap one. So it did inhibit the setting of the slip a little bit. Did it do it enough? I don't know, but it did something. I also sometimes am wondering, am I pulling these a little too early? Is 2 hours too quick to turn these molds around? That's always a possibility. That being said, I'm going to leave this one open up this other one, and let this one kind of firm up a bit before we try to pry it out of there. Well, okay, I think we've learned some important lessons here. Mold soap doesn't work. In fact, it was stickier where the mold soap was, and it just was almost impossible to get that slip out of there. Also, practice is important. I think I'm learning a better way to get this out of the mold, and I remembered that I had this. This is a handmade wooden cooking tool by a New Zealand artist that my brother and my sister-in-law got for me for Christmas years ago, and they thought it would be a cool sculpting tool, and it turns out they're right. I love using this tool when I'm doing large sculptures. And also, it just dawned on me when I was demolding this, I'm like, oh, I bet I can reach all the way up in there with the New Zealand tool, and it was perfect for reaching all the way inside of here and kind of easing that clay up. Look at that, I can get all the way into this space. So I don't think we're gonna try the wax. I think we're just gonna prep all the rest of the molds and just go for it, just carefully opening them up and maybe letting them sit just a little bit longer in the mold. Feeling good, feeling positive about this. Woo! Also feeling very relieved. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of the Cassowary Mug mold making adventure. There's still a lot to do on this mug, but it's more in the realm of glazing and production and slip casting, and not so much about mold making. The mold is done, and that is exciting. Is it perfect? Of course it's not perfect. Like I said at the start of this whole adventure, I have never made a perfect mold. It has its flaws, but it has faithfully reproduced this sculpture into these fantastic castings, and I am delighted with the results. It was an adventure. I'm glad that you went on the adventure with me. If you have not liked and subscribed to my channel, please do. It means the world to me. And if you want to learn more about making those silicone mold boxes, the intermediary production, like silicone molds I made of my original master mold, I'll put a link to that here, and then I'll let YouTube pick some other link that you might be interested in underneath it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode of Tiki Technical Tuesday.